There are plenty of quests that I'm not planning on doing a video on in The Witcher 3. Some of them are really short, some aren't very deep, and then some just feel generic. That last description is perfect for both the Shrieker contract and the Jenny of the Woods contract. They're not bad, but completely forgettable. But these quests are forever connected because these are essentially rehashes of two much better quests you do in White Orchard. Like, this is the RPG quest version of a reboot. But the crazy thing is, I think this was intentional, and to find out why, here's my quest analysis on the Shrieker and Jenny of the Woods. Shrieker is a contract in which Geralt goes to Crow's Perch and finds out that some flying beastie has been stealing cattle and killing hunters. Geralt follows some clues and tracks down and kills a cockatrice which behaves for all intents and purposes just like the griffin from the Beast of White Orchard. And as for Jenny of the Woods, this is a contract Geralt takes in Mid-Copse where he finds out that some female specter has been haunting the fields outside of the village. Geralt again follows some clues and tracks down and kills a night wraith, which behaves for all intents and purposes just like the noon wraith from the Devil by the Well contract. So it's clear that these are very similar to those earlier quests, but what's missing here is the level of detail and nuance. Geralt's adventures in White Orchard are bookended by the Griffin's presence, and there are many disparate references to what happened that caused the devil to begin haunting that well. So lots of world building and atmosphere. But with these quests I'm talking about today, there isn't that level of detail. The Shrieker is basically only mentioned during that quest line, and there's some surface level emotion as the contract giver is fostering a boy whose father was killed by the titular beast.
There were Dad, in the bushes, a hole through his belly, and he were moaning, screaming. I wanted to help, but how could I? How?
This does a job of giving this a bit of emotional weight, but the lack of any real exploration of these characters means we forget about this quest as soon as it's done and move on. Likewise, Jenny of the Woods stars Zula as a night wraith, and her story is tragic as Geralt follows clues that revealed that she was trying to avoid Bacchae, a guy who had an unhealthy crush on Zula, and murdered her when she didn't want to be with him. That's a sad story, but it doesn't really go anywhere beyond that, and the game doesn't devote any real time to it. Again, it's got some nominal emotion, with her ending being a tragic one.
Same time. So that's to mean our Zula's the wraith? Can't be. Such a good lass. And so pretty.
But Zula's story arc as a night wraith is as forgettable as the Shrieker. Essentially, these two quests feel like Witcher busy work, but maybe that's the point. Not every quest should have this epic story and all of these thought-provoking moments, because I don't think any video game developer has those kind of resources to spare for these minor side quests. The two quests I compared them to from White Orchard, well, that's from the opening of the game. Any competent developer is going to pour a ton of resources into opening its game as well as possible. And while the cutscene choreography in this pair of Velen contracts is much less refined than those of the prologue quests I've been comparing them to, I'm not actually bothered that these are a bit on the simpler side, because I think it's good for the game for some quests to be simpler than others. My favorite part of The Witcher 3 are the moral dilemmas and ambiguous situations Geralt finds himself in, but if every quest had those, well, I think that would dull their impact. Sometimes a monster just shows up and needs to be killed, and then you're gonna forget about it, just like a Witcher who takes hundreds of contracts probably forgets about a bunch of them. Basically, sprinkling in some of these simpler quests is a good way of pacing out your game and keeping it from getting stale and repetitive. But if that was the only point I had to make, I would not be devoting an entire video to these quests. No, I'm doing this because these quests bearing a striking similarity to two earlier quests is actually by design in my opinion. You pick up Shrieker in Crow's Perch right around when you meet the Bloody Baron, and you pick up Jenny of the Woods in Mid-Copse as you're about to meet Kira Metz. And since you meet those characters during two main quests that you obtain simultaneously, you're gonna run into these contracts roughly at the same point in the game. And these two contracts happen to be essentially reboots of two earlier quests that you also picked up simultaneously. Like, you can't tell me that that's unintentional. Well, you can. I would just ignore you. I think that the developers recognize that the Bloody Baron questline is a massive emotional whirlwind that takes hours to go through fully, and that you may likely need to come up for air with a nice simple Witcher contract. Likewise, the various quests you go through with Kira Metz, there is so much depth, so much nuance, and so many elements to keep track of that for the same reason, I think they wanted you to clean your palate with Jenny of the Woods. And what better way to clean your palate than with a good pleasant meal you've had before that you know you enjoyed. Now, this is all just me theorizing, but if CD Projekt Red did have this in mind, I really admire that design philosophy because it just speaks to an understanding of how your game is paced and the mental and emotional bandwidth that a player has. So the simplicity of these quests doesn't really bother me, but where they stumble a bit is that they ape the inspirational material a bit too much. The Shrieker has an interesting conceit with Geralt having to roust the cockatrice out of its cave, but then once he's done that, he has to chase it, which feels identical to him chasing the Griffin. And then fighting the Shrieker, is there any difference here than fighting the Griffin other than Vesemir was by your side for that one? And Jenny of the Woods likewise shows nothing to distinguish itself from Devil by the Well other than it's simpler, and that it's nighttime when you fight it, because it's a night wraith. And speaking of having to wait for it to be night, I like that Geralt meditates till the moment the night wraith announces itself. My style when I have something I need to wake up for is to wake up repeatedly and early and then work myself up into an anxious mess ahead of time. Geralt, though, looks like he hit the snooze button one too many times. Good thing the wraith didn't attack him while he was sleeping, otherwise Midcops might be haunted by a Geralt wraith. Now clearly that joke was not me at the top of my game, but please keep in mind that just like this quest has fewer resources devoted to it than the quest in the prologue, I have devoted fewer resources to this particular video than my other videos, so just remember that. Anyway, despite these fumbles and stumbles, the writing remains a step above the competition, even when there's not much depth to it. Take this conversation with the Alderman in Midcops where he drops a reference from the Witcher books.
You do it? You's a witcher, is you not? Straight off, a picture in me granny's book. Monstrum, or a portrayal of witchers. Remember like it were the day.
Like, I have never remembered that line when playing this game, but it's got more personality in it than nearly every other open world game's dialogue combined. Likewise in Shrieker, Geralt talking to the boy whose father was killed. I mean, this kid is nearly inconsolable, and while this is definitely emotionally manipulative and not really substantial, it still feels oh so Witcher 3.
Your reward, tain't much, but as they say, take care of the pennies.
Keep the coin. You took in an orphan. Need it more than I do.
And they call witches unfeeling, inhuman. Well, I thank ye, from the bottom of my heart.
But please, for the love of God, Geralt, why don't you just tell people right away what the monster is? Simcoe tells Geralt this about the Shrieker's appearance.
Beast, tell me what it looked like.
Something like a rooster, but huge, with a lizard's tail.
And right away, I was like, oh my god, it's the monster from the sewers in The Witcher 1, whatever it's called, it looks like a rooster. But Geralt waits till he finds footprints, a dead dog, and more footprints before announcing,
The cockatrice.
yeah, you think, Geralt? Likewise, in Jenny of the Woods, this lady tells Geralt that this wraith only appears at night, and Geralt even sucks up to her and says this.
I see. So she appeared to you just after twilight? Important clue, thanks.
But even a non-Witcher would know that this is a night wraith at this point. But nope, Geralt still has to go through the motions of finding the clues before announcing it to himself alone in a field.
A night wraith. Alderman probably knew the girl.
Gee, Geralt, maybe your first step given what we know about wraiths should have been to ask that alderman, hey, did any young ladies involved in any sort of romantic riffraff disappear recently? Maybe Geralt suffers from perfectionistic tendencies and has crazy anxiety about telling people his theories until he's checked every detail. Or maybe he's like me and he waits till the end of his job to announce things, just like I wait till the end of this video to ask for your likes and subscriptions. Me and Geralt are like two peas in a pod. Which gets me thinking, I'm doing a bunch of quest analyses on Geralt's adventures in The Witcher 3. You think he's doing any analyses of my quest analyses that I'm doing on his quests in The Witcher 3 and he's posting them on YouTube?
No.
Wow, that is demoralizing, but I do appreciate Geralt being very direct with me.